Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Liz Eberline, and I am the Education Programs Manager at the National Women's History Museum. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this very special Brave Girls Virtual Storytime book launch. For those of you who are with us for the first time, welcome. For those of you who have attended a Brave Girls program before, welcome back. Today's Brave Girls program is going to be a little bit different as we welcome not one, not two, but three authors as they all launch their brand new children's books honoring brave women. And we thank you for taking time out of your Friday to be with us this afternoon. As always, we are recording this presentation so that it can be available on our website following the event. Each author will be reading excerpts from their books, and then Karen, Nancy, and Songju will be answering questions following their reading. So if you, your class, or your little one would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. You may ask your question at any time during the presentation, and we will get to as many of those questions as time allows today. And now, I'm very pleased to introduce our first author this afternoon. Karen M. Greenwald worked as a policy analyst for a presidential campaign, founded an internationally award-winning brand strategy boutique, and has written articles appearing in print, online, and in the Washington Post before turning to children's books. Karen belongs to WI 12 by 12 and co-founded #SunRightFun, a popular NF summer contest that raises money for kidlit charities. Her debut picture book, A Vote for Susanna, the First Woman Mayor, launches today. It has been ranked on Amazon's government kidlit hot new releases list since appearing for pre-order in February. Please give a very warm welcome to author Karen M. Greenwald. Karen?
Thank you so much, Liz. And thank you so much to the museum for hosting us today. I am so proud to be here for the first book launch that you guys have done with Nancy and Songju to celebrate these incredible women that I think most people have maybe not heard about or don't know enough about. So before I read my passage from the book, I would like to give you a little bit of background. 3 years ago, I came across a line about Susanna Salter while researching another story. Just a little sentence, probably most people wouldn't have even noticed it or paid attention, but something struck me about it and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I knew this was a story I had to tell. But because picture books have very strong requirements, and because all things that are interesting that have happened in history may not fit the structure of a picture book, I needed to get started. I spent my first weekend studying with an amazing amount of very helpful librarians at Kansas State University, where Susanna Salter was actually a student in the late 1870s, which, by the way, was a very unusual thing, given that at the time, scientists said that if women went to school in a higher education environment, the more their brain increased, the less their attractive facade would be. And also it would injure some of their organs. This was what scientists were saying about women being educated beyond the normal public school system. Very shocking and not very scientific, I might add. So I spent many, many hours that weekend and had more questions, went back to the library. All this was virtual, I might add. And so I went back and called the library the next weekend to find out that the library had actually burned to the ground. I was shocked. First, of course, wanting to know, was everyone okay? And thank goodness they all were. And then how much damage was done to their collections. It was an unbelievable, unbelievable tragedy. And I must admit, there was a part of me that thought, is this an omen? Should I not really be engaging in this story? Because the first opening to it isn't such a great situation. But thankfully, I did not take that as an omen, and I continued. Along the way, there were many hurdles to get the information I wanted. Most information about Susanna has been taken from an article from 1954. Some people I spoke to would say, oh yes, I've heard of her, and reference a blog, a newspaper article. But all of these things mainly repackaged for their brand, this one article. The article, and actually all of the articles that I read that were contemporary, lacked one important thing to me. Why did Susanna run for mayor? To me, this is the heart of the story. It's the center of who she was and what her values were. So I started studying her family history, trying to find anything I could. I dove into newspapers from the 1800s, 1887, 1888, and I realized that Susanna Salter was not just a nice woman from a small city in Kansas. She was an international icon. Why didn't I know more? Why didn't anyone? Almost no one I spoke to could answer my questions. They really, really didn't know. And that is the true answer of why I knew I had to write this book. How could a woman that made world news in a time when there was no internet, there was no social media, they had a mill in Argonia, but before the mechanism could be put in, the mill burned down. How did anybody know about a woman from a city of under 500 people in the middle of America? It's fascinating. And I was also stunned by some of the media that I read. Here is an example of what I was able to find just by looking at newspapers. Susanna Salter was 5'3". She weighed 128 pounds. She wore her hair crimped to the side. She made her own clothing. She spoke with mostly proper English. Another article referenced these points and said, here are some interesting facts about Miss Salter. If women are to continue being elected for this office, these are the important pieces of information that we need to know. Not what her background was, not about her education, not about the fact that her father was the first mayor of Argonia, her husband's father was a former lieutenant governor, and her husband worked in the government in Argonia, and she often helped him. None of that was relevant, or the fact that she had had, as she called it, parliamentary training. But we all need to know what she weighed, what she looked like, and how she wore her hair. My personal favorite, there's one thing about Susanna Salter, an article said, we know that she is the best dishwasher of any mayor or alderman that has ever run. And now I'd like to read you a piece from the book in order to give you a sense of where this is in the book. There we go. The story takes place in 1934 in a woman named Dora's kitchen. Grandma Dora bakes her own birthday cake every year. She's a very feisty lady. And one year, 1934, in Norman, Oklahoma, she invites her grandson, Ed, to help her. And 7-year-old Ed is a little unsure about it. And when Grandma asks him why, he says, my friends say that only girls bake, boys don't bake. Grandma Dora thinks about it and offers him this question. She says, your friends know a lot about what boys don't do and can do. Would you like to hear something about a woman who was told what she couldn't do because she was a woman? And along the way, this is the story that she tells young Ed. It all started 2 nights before Argonia's election, when Susanna met with a group of women to talk about candidates. They spoke a lot about Mr. S.P. Wilson, who ran the local flour, feed, and coal businesses. Everyone agreed he would make a good mayor and that his name should be on the election ballot. A ballot is the names of people you're voting for, right? Ed asked. Yes, said Dora. And at the meeting, Susanna and some of the women began planning a sample ballot to give voters on election day. It was a list of people they hoped others would vote for too. But just then, 2 men in the back of the room rudely interrupted the meeting. Ed leaned in. They yelled that women should stay out of politics, that they should only raise children, do housework, and Bake cakes? Ed asked. Yes, Dora said, but the bullies didn't know Susanna. Most women at the time couldn't go to college. They didn't learn governing skills. However, Susanna had done both, and she wanted a woman's voice heard. What did she do? Ed sprinkled in water. Susanna kept working as if the bullies weren't there. The other women followed her lead. They finished writing the ballots. Susanna was brave. But Susanna's story wasn't done. The cake wasn't either. 20 men from town met in secret and came up with a prank. They made another version of the women's ballot with one enormous change. You will have to read the book to find out what that is. And I will say that they often say, don't judge a book by its cover. In this case, I think that you absolutely should judge it by the cover done by the beautifully talented Sean James, who I thank so much for these beautiful illustrations. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone. I have been so touched by your interest, by your support, by the outpouring of love I've experienced over the course of writing this book. And a very fast special thank you to Dr. Mary Salter and her brother David, great-grandchildren of Susanna Salter, who, after I spent a year and a half digging and digging, trying to find everything I could, opened up a treasure trove of handwritten letters and other ephemera from Susanna Salter. And as I wrote the final draft of the book, I looked at Susanna's words on my desktop, and I really felt like I was doing something that history had forgotten to do, giving this amazing woman the credit she deserved. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Karen, very much for sharing some of Susanna's story with us. If you're interested in reading the entire book or hearing Karen read that book, she will be back with us for a Brave Girls Virtual Storytime in November. And I'll talk a little bit about that more later. So thank you, Karen. Just a reminder that if you have a question to ask Karen, Nancy, or Songju, type those questions into the Q&A box and we will get to those following the program. Our next author is Nancy Churnin, a former theater critic and journalist, and the award-winning author of 10 picture books about people who persevered to achieve their dreams and make the world a better place. Among her awards, a Junior Library Guild selection, a Kirkus Star, multiple National Council for the Social Studies notables, multiple Silver Eureka Awards, multiple inclusions on a Mighty Girl list, Sydney Taylor Notable, Towner Award nominee, Sakura Medal finalist, notable book for a global society, and many, many, many more. Dear Mr. Dickens and A Queen to the Rescue, the story of Henrietta Sold, founder of Hadassah, will be out in October 2021. A native New Yorker, Nancy lives in North Texas with her family, which includes a dog named Dog and 2 cantankerous cats. Nancy?
Thank you, Liz. It's such a pleasure to be here. And again, I want to kudos to Karen on her great presentation. And thank you, Liz, and the National Women's History Museum. I'm so happy to be here with Karen and Songju, sharing our stories. 3 women who had not had books about them before. To tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to write this particular book, I have to take you back in time to when I'm a little girl growing up in the Bronx. My favorite room in the house was what we called the library because my father had built shelves from floor to ceiling on every wall of the room. Later in life, I was to find out that that was supposed to have been the dining room, but my mother didn't like to cook. I guess neither parent liked to cook. But we all loved to read. And I was reading Dickens, Charles Dickens in particular. I had so many favorites, but Charles Dickens was one of my passions. And I would be saying, it is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest I go to than I have ever known. And please, sir, may I have some more, please? And that line, as you know, is from Oliver Twist, which was a real favorite of mine, not only because it was a wonderful book, but because Charles Dickens through that book had change the world. I mean, children had to work in unbearable conditions in his day. And because of his book, he had changed hearts and minds. And I was really always such a fan of Charles Dickens, but I had one problem with it. I was a Jewish girl growing up in the Bronx. And when I would come across the character of Fagin, it was so hurtful to me. And I didn't understand how someone I admired so much could have created such an ugly Jewish stereotype. It was hurtful to me, and I felt it made other people look at the Jewish community in a negative way. And I always wished I could go back in time and write a letter to Charles Dickens and ask him why he had done that, or if he could change. And as I grew up and became a children's book author and loved research, one day I came across in my research that someone had written a letter to Charles Dickens about this. And once I discovered the story of Eliza Davis, I felt I was overcome by how that she had done what I had dreamed of doing. And I couldn't wait to share her story and his with the world, because she had truly changed history. So I would like to read you the opening pages of Dear Mr. Dickens. Think of someone famous you admire. What would you do if that person said or wrote something unfair? Would you speak up? Would you risk getting that person angry? Eliza Davis did. Charles Dickens was the most famous writer of Eliza's time. English people from all walks of life eagerly paid 2 pence for his weekly magazine all the year round to read the latest installments of his stories. Later, he'd publish the stories as books that passengers bought at bookshops and railway stations. But what made Charles Dickens a hero in Eliza's eyes is that he used the power of his pen to help others. When he wrote about children forced to labor in workhouses, people demanded change. When his readers were moved to tears by tales of families struggling in desperate, dirty conditions, they gave what they could to charities, as did Eliza. Yes, Dickens had a heart as big as England, overflowing with compassion for everyone except. Eliza remembered when she read Dickens's book, Oliver Twist, about a poor orphan. She had loved it at first until she got to chapter 8, when she read about the old shriveled Jew teaching Oliver to steal. Eliza was Jewish. Charles Dickens described the Jew as dishonest, selfish, cruel, and ugly. The character's name was Fagin, but over and over Dickens wrote, the Jew, the Jew, the Jew. Each time a word hurt like a hammer on Eliza's heart. England was already a difficult place for Jewish people in the 1860s. Many jobs were closed to them. They didn't have the right to vote or to study or work at universities. If people thought that all Jews were like Fagin, would Jewish people ever be treated fairly? Someone had to speak up. But who? Eliza wasn't famous or powerful, but she had the same 3 things that Charles Dickens had: a pen, paper, and something to say. She sat down and wrote a letter. So in the rest of the book, you'll find out what happens when Charles Dickens receives that letter and what happens between the two of them. One of the things that I am hoping for so much is that I'm hoping that the end of the book won't be the end of the book for you and for the kids. I hope that Eliza's example will inspire kids to want to pick up paper and pen or write on the computer, wherever you write. And if you see somebody in a position of influence who is saying or doing something that's not right, or is in a position to change things or make things better, that you will have the courage to write those letters. With all of my books on my website, nancychurnin.com, I create I provide free teacher's guides, and I provide projects with a special page where kids can share what they do with parental permission. I'm hoping kids will write those letters, will share them, will encourage other kids to speak up. I want to say also that this was such a labor of love for me. As I told you in the beginning, this is very personal to me. And I'm also very grateful. I worked with 3 Dickens scholars to make sure that everything was correct. Professor Don Ban at the University of North Texas, Professor Murray Baumgarten at the University of Santa Cruz, Professor David Peroisian, who edited the Dickens Quarterly and was with the University of Buckingham in England and the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And also I've had the support of the Charles Dickens Museum in London, which is, I'm actually going to be presenting to London school children on Tuesday. And I'm so, this is not only a story about speaking up, but the other thing I hope it'll leave you with, when you read the book, you will see that Charles Dickens responds. First, he's resistant. Later, he comes to see her point of view, and ultimately he changes. And because she changes his heart, you will see how his writing changes after that, and how his words end up changing the hearts and minds of people in England and making it a more welcoming place for the Jewish community. And once he does that, Eliza sees him, to go back to the book, she sees him as doing the most noble thing a person can do, because the most noble thing you can do, we are all imperfect. We all make mistakes. The idea is not to take the people who have made mistakes and never hear from them again. But if they are able to change, to atone, that is the noblest thing you can do. You have to forgive them with a full heart. And as Eliza did, she wrote a letter to his daughter after his passing and said he had done the noblest thing that a person could do, which was to change. And I hope we can all learn from this story also to forgive each other. And it's something I think is a good thing to remember in this contentious world. Thank you so much for hosting me and all of us.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing part of Eliza's story. That is kind of a great cliffhanger to read the rest of the book, wondering what was in the letter to change Charles Dickens' heart and in his writing in later times. So thank you so much. And thank you, Nancy. We'll see you back in a few minutes. Our final author for today is Songju Daemicke. I'm so sorry. I practiced this and I think that I totally messed that up. I apologize, Songju, very much for mutilating your last name. Songju is a former software engineer with Motorola, grew up in China, and is an award-winning children's book author. Her picture book, Cow Chong Weighs an Elephant, was a best STEM book, the winner of 2018 Kala Best Juvenile Literature, an outstanding science trade book, a notable social studies book, and a mathical honor book. When she's not writing, she loves attending to her flowers and vegetables in her garden, hiking, swimming, and shooting her next special photograph. Songju lives in the Chicago suburbs with her husband and their daughters. Songju, it's wonderful to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Liz. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, National Women History Museum, for hosting our book launch. It's such an honor. My book, To Youyou's Discovery, Find a Cure for Malaria, is about a brave Chinese woman scientist. To Youyou, she used her background with traditional Chinese medicine to develop a treatment for malaria, helping save millions of lives. To Youyou became the first Chinese woman to win a Nobel Prize. She made history. My inspiration to write this book was from a TV show. In early 2019, I watched a BBC program called Icons, the greatest persons of the 20th century. To Youyou, along with Albert Einstein, Madame Curie, and Alan Turing were the 4 candidates in the scientist category. I was thrilled that Tu Youyou had been selected. At the same time, I also realized that most Americans had never heard of her, even though she had saved millions of lives and had won the prestigious Nobel Prize. As a Chinese American, I'm extremely proud of her achievement and her contribution to the world. So I made it my personal mission to write a book for young readers to share her remarkable journey. This book celebrates women in STEM. Tu Youyou is a great role model whose story I hope will inspire young girls to study science and engineering. You know, these fields are not for boys only. I hope many young girls will feel empowered by Tu Youyou's story and pursue a STEM field career. Future is for brave girls. As a former engineer myself, I can tell you, engineering is a fun job, and women make great engineers. I'm going to read part of my book. In 1969, people all across the world were sick. Malaria, a life-threatening disease carried by mosquitoes, was spreading quickly and seemed resistant to all known treatments. Reading the news. In her Beijing apartment, Tu Youyou was distressed. Many people were suffering, and she had wanted to help save lives since she was a child. Though most girls in 1930s China didn't go to school, Youyou's parents value education and sent her along with her brothers. Curious Youyou loved her classes, especially science, but at the age of 15, she became seriously ill with tuberculosis, a serious lung disease, and she had to stop going to school. After several bedridden months, Youyou woke up in a strange room, her mother clasping her hands. Youyou's throat was raw and red, but her smile weakened. She could breathe again antibiotics prescribed by her doctor had saved her life. Youyou began to recover, but was still too weak to leave her home. Over the next 2 years, her mother's herb soups slowly nursed her back to full strength. As she healed, she thought about how different kinds of medicine, both modern and traditional, had helped her. She decided she wanted to study science and save lives, just as her life had been saved. I'm going to skip a couple pages here. Next page, please. Skip this one too. Yeah, then is yes here. No, go back, go back. Yes, this page. Yes, right. Thank you. No, the one, no, next page. Next page, please. Oh, yes, this one is right. This one. Yes, the one farmer's story sprites hope in Youyou. Previous page. Trampling with a high fever. Yes, this one. Yeah. He had seen some qinghao, a grassy plant near his home. He remembered an old folk saying that recommended qinghao as a fever medicine. So he'd pulled and eaten several handfuls of the plant. The next day, his fever had gone away. Excited, Youyou dug up some qinghao, which in English is called sweet wormwood. Next page, please. Back at her lab, Youyou and her team washed and cut the plants into pieces, soaked them in water for hours, then boiled, filtered, and condensed them into a thick liquid. But when they tested against the disease, the malaria parasites just kept wriggling under the microscope. Why hadn't it worked? Youyou was determined to keep experimenting. Okay, we skip next page. Yes, skip. Yes, here. After thinking all their experiments that hadn't worked, Youyou's team refocused on qinghao, the most popular folk remedy. Late one night, Youyou could not sleep. She pulled out her well-read family copy of Handbook of Prescription for Emergencies, an ancient Chinese remedy book. Youyou reread the qinghao remedy. 青蒿一握，以水2升之，搅取之，尽服之。A handful of qinghao immersed in 2 liters of water. Wring out the juice and drink it up. Next page, please. Almost all herb preparation in the lab use a boiling process. But this remedy didn't mention boiling, only soak in water. Could heat had destroyed the part of qinghao that could heal? I'm going to stop here, allowed you to read and enjoy my book. to find out what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you, Songju. What a beautiful book, and the illustrations are absolutely stunning. Now I would like to invite all of our authors back on screen. Remember, if you have a question about any of the stories that were read today, or you would like to know more about the author or how they came about writing the book, put your question in the Q&A and we'll get to many of them as we can. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you all so very much for sharing parts of your wonderful stories with us. What inspirational women we have with us today, and also featured in the stories. We do have some questions from the audience, and I'm going to kind of open this question up to all of you. And you all kind of spoke about this before you started reading your books, but I would love to know why you chose the characters that you chose to feature in these books. Why did you choose these women? Why did you think their stories were important to feature for a children's book?
I'll go first, I guess.
Karen, I'll start with you. Sorry.
Since nobody's going. Well, I think I did speak a lot about that, but even more to the point, Susanna Salter was a victim of bullying in her city. And without giving too much of the story away, one of the things that really struck me in doing research, I was fascinated because one of the first things I looked for was the congressional record about the law that was passed in Kansas. In 1887, Kansas passed the first and only law permitting women in certain types of small cities, certain types of municipalities, to both be permitted to run for office and to vote. And this was shocking. It sent shockwaves across the country. And the governor, who was very beloved and was very against slavery, said that he signed it merely because it was, quote, an experiment that could be overturned in 2 years' time. He said the smartest and best men did not vote, and he felt the same thing would happen with regards to women. I don't know why intellect is a requirement, but this is what he said. So he fully intended to overturn the law. And had Susanna Salter not run, and had she not won, the law would have been taken away. And who knows when women would have been given a chance. And one thing I meant to mention is that not only was she the first mayor in America, she was the first woman elected mayor in the world. So this was a giant watershed moment. The next year, in a town called Oskaloosa in Kansas, the city there elected not only a woman mayor, but also an entire government body of women. And like Susanna Salter, who took Argonia from debt to solvency, they did the same thing, and it just kept continuing. Now, it took the rest of the country way too long to catch up, and this should have been a thing at the beginning of our country, but it was a very important moment. And the fact that everyone from people in Kansas to political leaders that I spoke to about it, who didn't know about it and had never heard the story, that really deeply surprised me. And the fact that there is no book about her, well, there wasn't. Now there is, but there wasn't, was another reason why I knew I had to change the discussion and the narrative and correct histories in the state. That's why.
And I just went Nancy, I'd like to hear from you next, but I just wanted to point out that some of Susanna's family is actually attending today. They've been very active in the chat, so welcome. Such a wonderful thing to have you with us. I just wanted to mention that before we moved on. Nancy, could you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, and also I know that we have Valerie Wade here from the Salter Museum, and she and her mother Carol have been a force in this process for me as well. So I'm really honored to have them. And every generation of Salter that's here. Thank you so much.
I think that's
Nancy.
that's so wonderful that you do honor to the Salter family and Susanna's great, incredible contribution. She needed her book written. I'm so glad you did, Karen. You know, for me, my goal always in my books is to look for people who inspire me, that I think will inspire the kids, books that will leave them after they finish the book wanting to be the hero or heroine of their own lives, give them ideas for what they can do to change the world. And Eliza Davis not only did that, but it was such a personal thing to me, because I told you I loved Charles Dickens as a kid. And it was actually a little bit of a source of friction between my mother and me, because we had lost family in the Holocaust. And she would say, how could you like Charles Dickens? He created Fagin, and it's such an ugly stereotype. And I just knew that Charles Dickens was more than that, because he had such a big heart and had done so much. I couldn't let go. And when I discovered Eliza Davis, she had written the letter I wished I had written. And it turned out, as you read the book, you'll find out she does change his heart. He ends up creating the kindly Mr. Rhea and Our Mutual Friend, his first really nice Jewish character, and becomes an advocate for the Jewish people, and lost change during their lifetime. And it's so incredible. He was even nobler than I had realized. And this was such a healing thing. This has become my mother's favorite book. She reads it, rereads it almost every day, because it told her that people really are good at heart, if you allow me to say that, as Anne Frank said, that if you can reach them where their heart is, people are capable of change, of doing better. It gave me hope. It was a bond for us. And again, I hope it will inspire kids. You know, kids sometimes may feel small in their world because adults seem to be running everything. But you know what? You all have the same things that these powerful people do. You have pen, paper, and something to say. That's why I wrote that. I hope we'll encourage a new generation to speak up, to reach out, to make things better. And I hope ultimately to heal, because if you are able to get people's hearts to change, then we need to come together and forgive and move on together.
Beautiful sentiment. Thank you. And Songju, why did you choose to write What About Youyou? Why did you write about her and have her as your character?
Yeah, because just right now in United States, and the average is Stanfield is 75% they are men, and only a quarter are women. And I think that need to be changed. And you know, we have many smart young girls, but sometimes they are just not that confident, because you say, oh, the math or engineer are for boys, or girls. No, we are not. You know, sometimes this is like getting influenced by the people. But I tell this story. I hope the girls will, you know, feel empowered from, you know, read to Youyou story. You can. You are just as intelligent as boys, and you set your mind into it, and you study it, and you work hard, you persist it, and you can do it. You can change the world. Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, I choose her to Youyou, to tell to Youyou story.
Well, all of the stories are inspirational, and you know, women who we should look up to as well. And these stories are not stories that are well known. Karen, you said this, there had not been anything written about Susanna really before you wrote about her. And I have a question that came in from an audience member for you, Karen, about the cake that you referenced in the excerpt. And they want to know if you could talk a little bit about the recipe for the cake. I don't know if you know the recipe or the history.
Oh, I
behind the cake or
do.
whatever.
I do. I do actually. And for anyone who's interested, the recipe is listed on my website under, there's a tab for a vote for Susanna, and it's a drop down. And I do have the recipe and a photo of the first time that I made it. It takes some work. the cake definitely requires an electric beater, but the original maker of it did not use one. So if you want to try to make it without one, I mean, more power to you. The first time I made the cake, it's an angel food cake, which actually was the cake in the late 1800s. It became a wild sensation. Of course, I actually researched that as well to know more about it. And there's a funny little story where the man who created it, although that's a controversy, didn't really tell anybody about the type of pan to use because the egg whites have to rise to a certain level. And so he sold it, I think, for $25 and thought nobody will be able to make it and I will be the king of the cake. Unfortunately, science, technology, and the modernization of a kitchen definitely stole the win from his sales, but it's delicious. It's a little heavy on the sugar, but it is delicious. And I have Carol Pierce to thank for getting that recipe to me. One thing I will say, the first time I made it, I didn't tell anyone about what I was writing about, though Nancy knew, but very few people knew who I was writing about. And I did not have the special pan, and something was wrong with my oven. So I had to finesse my way to someone else's house, our family best friends, and without telling them why, basically made quite a mess in their kitchen. So to the Rothmans, thank you again for being my test kitchen. So, and also I'll say on my website, there are lots of places where you can upload. So if any of the classrooms, any of the teachers here, parents, any of the kids want to make the cake, it's definitely doable. And please upload pictures for me so I can see how it turns out for you.
Thank you so much. I love when audience members kind of pick up on a small detail in the book and ask questions like that. How wonderful. I have another question for all three of you. And the question is, you all are writing about women that you felt passionately about. What approaches did you use when in writing that book? What approaches did you use to get your readers to care about them too, as much as you did?
Well, one thing that, I mean, I had revised this many times because one of the challenges in writing this book was I wanted to be absolutely accurate. So every word quoted is from the letters or from the books, from Charles Dickens books. But I didn't want it to sound academic. I wanted it to be, again, as you said, something that the kids would connect with. And when I came up with this, I asked myself, why am I writing this? What do I want kids to do with this? And that led to the opening. It's kind of an unconventional opening, because very often, most of my books, I start with a little anecdote or you see somebody doing something. This one, I just went for it. I just talked directly to the reader. Think of someone famous you admire. What would you do if that person said or wrote something unfair? Would you speak up? Would you risk getting that person angry? Eliza Davis did. So I hope that with that opening, I was driving a story where kids are thinking on each page, gosh, would I have done that? And what about when he rebuffs her at first? Would I have been intimidated? Would I have stopped? Would I have like, oh my goodness, my idol doesn't think much of me. So I just tried to get them to identify with her every step of the way. And I was the opening, I hope does that, because I'm talking directly to them. And by the end, they think about what she did and would they have done the same and what will you do? So that's how I tried to do it.
What about you, Songju? How do you get your audience to connect with this character that you feel so passionately about?
I think because to Youyou, her amazing achievement is medicine. So I think I start with she was sick when she was young. So through that, her sickness, that's how she built up she set her art onto and her life goal to help save life, just like her life was saved. So I think that's people will identify, especially children writer will think about all related her own experience and how to help other people, how themselves be helped. So that's will they feel the connection. So I build up from there.
Oh, guess me. To me, one of the really important things about writing a girl power story is that it shouldn't just be directed to girls. Because if we only keep telling girls, look, there are girls and women who've done amazing things, then we're only educating one part of the population. And it really doesn't move the needle. So two parts of this approach. One, I felt like if I just told the story of the election, it would limit the emotional connection. And also, once I read Susanna's personal letters in cursive, I might add, cursive matters. Once I read those, I felt like I could answer the question that no newspaper then, now, at any point answered, and that was why she ran. And to me, that's the heart of the story. It's the heart of her and it's the heart of the story. So I wanted to create something that had more emotional appeal than just the, I mean, the election's remarkable, but that connected with everyone, not just young girls. And so I told the story through a grandmother who had been there to her grandson, so that he could see that, you know, who you are on the inside is what matters. And your potential is limitless when you put your mind to it. And that to me is, through Susanna Salter, the message that I hope people take away from it. So, and that was why.
Well, I think too, it's partly it's the story that you're telling and how the message that you want to convey. But I think part of it too is the illustrations that you have in your book that help those who are reading it make that connection with your story too. And something that I've learned doing these Brave Girls Virtual Storytimes is how little control you as authors have over the illustrations and that process. So how does that all work, you know, with getting the illustrator to connect with your story the same way that you do to produce this final product, which I have to say all of the illustrations are beautiful in all three books and I love them, but how do you get that? How do you convey your message to the illustrator to get this final product?
The way it works in the publishing world is the editor really does that. The editor is an amazing person. My editor on this book was Wendy McClure, and the editor communicates with the writer and the illustrator. She's almost like a matchmaker, and she doesn't even want you to meet. But she will, a good editor also will show you early sketches to see if they're going in the right direction. But you know, Wendy, my editor, understood this story right away, and she was able to convey to Bethany Stancliffe is the amazing illustrator who did this. And I have to tell you this, you know, I ran everything by my three Dickens scholars, who I called my three wise men. And they did have like little points for me about writing this or that, or exactly that it was 2 pence for all the year round and all this and that. But they had really nothing to say about Bethany Stancliffe's illustrations, except they absolutely loved them and how beautifully she conveyed the Victorian period. I will say that, you know, Wendy, you know, I helped with that. We researched the exact size of the magazine at that time and what color the cover was. No, really, everything is so important. But the biggest thing was to convey that Victorian feeling. But also there's an emotion there. And Bethany Stancliffe did a fabulous job. And she really got it. And to me, my favorite spread, we didn't see this, but was this one. Because this is a book all about the power of words, the power of language. And in this double spread, if I can hold it correctly, you can see Eliza on one side. You can see Eliza on one, it's Eliza on one side and Charles Dickens on the other. And notice, see, they're from two different worlds, right? And look how different, they're different genders, different religions, they move in different circles. But look, she has them on one page, a reminder we're all in one world together. Look at the letters that bind them to going down the center. That's brings them together. He's holding a Bible that she's given him as a gift. She's holding this last letter to her. The child is reading a book because things have changed now and he can feel good about what he's reading because he can see himself reflected in a better way. The power of books, the power of words. Bethany totally got that. Again, the editor, Wendy McClure, she's the guiding spirit. But I think you'll agree this is, to me, just such a beautiful page. I do what I do because I believe in the power of words. And to me, this page says it all about that.
That's beautiful.
We are starting to run out of time, but I do, Karen, want to hear from you and also Songju just about the illustrations. And
sure.
Is the final product everything that you thought that it would be when you wrote the story?
I am so thrilled. That's why I say judge it by the cover, but by every single page. I will say in my process, and Wendy McClure was also my editor, and she is everything that Nancy has said about her, and just a wonderful human. And also Andrea Hall, same could be said. They're both just amazing to work with. I think I probably sent Wendy 10 emails with multiple pictures and diagrams, and not of what to draw, but of the research. I spent probably a year reading every single newspaper article from Argonia 1887 to 1888. So all the names on the buildings that you see in the city are the actual names of buildings. I can even tell you that the most expensive hat was $3. Mayor Salter earned $1. So my Nancy would agree, my detail level is kind of in overdrive. So I know. So I had an amazing opportunity. I was actually allowed to make comments. I would never have judged the artistic style, and who could? It's gorgeous. But on details that I felt were really important, things, to be honest, that I wanted in there for the Salter family, that I wanted in there for the museum, that I wanted in there for keeping a perfect record of Argonia, since I did have that information. And since I do understand the relationship based on the personal letters I've read, I think I was given a little more leeway to comment, which was incredibly meaningful to me. So I think it was, unfortunately, I've never met Sean. I hope to someday. But in a very separate way, I think we had a great working relationship together.
And Songju, are the illustrations exactly what you thought they would be? How was that for you?
All the hard work feel worth it when you first see your story come to life with all the artist illustration. And we did, like Nancy said, at the beginning, we went through the editors and we communicate. Then you see, I passed a lot of my research, and I think she did a lot of research. She did an incredible job, and I'm really happy. It's just a beautiful work. Yeah, very proud.
Okay, I want to close, if you all wouldn't mind, just a 10-second answer to this as we wrap the program up. But this is such a great question. I want to make sure that we touch on it. Do you have any thoughts on how to help brave girls become brave women? 10 seconds, Nancy.
Take actions. So what you want to do is sort of channel what you've seen and take it into the present time. So if Eliza wrote something, back in the 19th century, what can you write now? Take an action. Actions will turn you into turn the brave girls into the brave women.
Wonderful, thank you. Karen, 10 seconds.
Hold history accountable. Make sure that these stories are told and shared, not with just girls, but with everyone. And like Nancy said, because I care so much about making this story a known thing, I have on my website a section for teachers and students to join me in a campaign to get a stamp made of Susanna Salter so that kids can feel what it's like to be a part of a nonpartisan, friendly, kind, wonderful campaign. And that's how you do it, education.
Wonderful. Songju, final words?
Okay. I call all the brave girls, dream big, work hard. You can be scientist, you can be engineer. Do it. You can do it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you
I love
all
that.
so very much. A big thank you to Chernin, Nancy, and Songju for helping the National Women's History Museum be a part of such a special day, for sharing all of these beautiful stories and your connections to all of these brave women. Just a reminder that this presentation today is being recorded. It will be available on Women's History Museum's YouTube channel later this week. If you enjoyed today's Brave Girls program, please join us next week on Wednesday, October 6th at 12 p.m. Eastern, when we're joined by author Sylvia Lopez for a reading of her book, Queen of Tejano Music, Selena, in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. On Wednesday, October 20th, author Delonda Coleman will be here for a special Halloween-themed reading of her book, More Than a Princess, with Q&A to follow. And if you enjoyed Susanna's story today, Karen will return on Wednesday, November 10th for a full reading of her book, A Vote for Susanna, the First Woman Mayor, in observance of Election Day. All of these programs are free to register, but we do require advanced registration on our Eventbrite page. Thank you all so very much for being here. This has been absolutely wonderful. You all are an inspiration. We hope to see you back very, very soon. And thank you to all of our attendees for your questions and your engagement, and to the Salter family for joining us this afternoon as well. So thank you again to all of you. It's been a wonderful experience. We hope that that we see you all again soon. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, the National
you.
Women's History Museum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.